There is a before and an after, a dividing line in the career of Kanye West so stark. It separates the myth of the tortured genius from the reality of a man who declared war on the very world that celebrated him. For 2 decades, he was not just a musician, he was a cultural event. He was the college dropout who rewrote the rules of hip-hop, the Louis Vuitton don who crashed high fashion, the egomaniac who proclaimed himself a god and made us believe it. His genius was undeniable, his influence inescapable. He was an easy artist to defend, the quintessential mad genius whose public outbursts, political rants, and award show hijinks were often forgiven as the price of his brilliance. We created a special category for Kanye, one with different rules, because the art was just that good. However, a sinister shift began to occur. The target of his chaos, once diffuse and aimed at the establishment, began to narrow, to focus with laser-like precision. The man who had built a legacy on sonic innovation and cultural disruption was now meticulously dismantling it, brick by brick, in a relentless public campaign against the women in his orbit. And while this is not an attempt to diagnose or simplify the complex mental health struggles he has openly faced, there is a crucial, undeniable perspective to confront. One that reveals his downfall was not a sudden cancellation, but the inevitable consequence of a calculated war on women that finally, irrevocably, shattered the myth of his invincibility. This is the investigation into how Kanye West's career, once seemingly bulletproof, was ultimately ended not by a rival, not by the industry, but by the catastrophic fallout of his own targeted aggression. The architecture of Kanye's untouchable status was built on a foundation of groundbreaking art and a carefully cultivated narrative of rebellion. From the moment he released The College Dropout in 2004, he positioned himself as the outsider, the voice for those who didn't fit in. He was the guy in the pink polo who talked about his feelings, who challenged the bling-obsessed gangster tropes of hip-hop, and who preached self-belief with a religious fervor. His infamous interruption of Taylor Swift at the 2009 MTV Video Music Awards was a pivotal moment. While widely condemned, it also cemented his image as an uncontrollable force of nature, a man so passionate about art that he would defy any norm. The industry and the public began to operate on an unspoken agreement. Kanye's chaos was part of his package. His mental health struggles, culminating in his 2016 hospitalization, only deepened this narrative. He was the tortured artist, and his pain was the source of his genius. This framing granted him a near-limitless supply of grace. He could go on bizarre rants, wear a Make America Great Again hat, and claim slavery was a choice. And a significant portion of his fan base and peers would contextualize it as Kanye being Kanye. The system was built to absorb his shocks. The first major crack in this carefully constructed immunity, however, appeared not in his political statements, but in the private sphere of his family life. His relationship with Kim Kardashian was a merger of 2 of the world's most powerful personal brands. For years, it was a source of fascination and, for Kanye, immense creative inspiration. Songs like Ultralight Beam and the entire The Life of Pablo album were steeped in adoration for his family. But as their marriage began to publicly unravel, his behavior towards Kim transformed from possessive adoration to public control. The war had begun. In a series of since-deleted Twitter rants in 2020 and 2021, he launched a vicious public campaign against his then-wife. He revealed private details about their relationship, including that Kim and her mother, Kris Jenner, had considered terminating her first pregnancy. He posted screenshots of private text messages. This was more than a messy divorce. It was a digital violation, a deliberate attempt to humiliate and control a woman by weaponizing their most intimate moments. He framed it as a fight for his family, but his actions were those of a man seeking to dominate the narrative and punish Kim for asserting her own autonomy. The public watched, horrified, as the man who once sang, "I need you to run right back to me," more specifically, was now trying to run Kim's life from his Twitter account. This campaign escalated beyond social media and into the legal and professional realms. He publicly attacked Kris Jenner, calling her Kris Jong-un and accusing her of being a master manipulator who had orchestrated the divorce. He turned his fury on Kim's then-boyfriend, Pete Davidson, with a level of vitriol that transcended typical celebrity feud gossip. In his music video for Yeezy, he depicted the kidnapping and burial of a claymation figure clearly modeled after Davidson. This wasn't just artistic expression. It was a public, violent fantasy that many interpreted as a threat. The message was clear. Any woman who left his orbit, and any man who entered hers, would become a target of his immense platform and unchecked rage. The mad genius defense began to wear thin. This was no longer about art or politics. It was about a pattern of using his power to intimidate and harass the women in his life, when they did not comply with his desires. The true turning point, the moment the war expanded from his personal life into the global arena, was his entanglement with the fashion industry and his escalating anti-Semitic remarks. But woven directly into this period was a specific venomous attack on a woman who represented everything he seemed to resent. Vogue editor-in-chief Anna Wintour. For years, Kanye had craved validation from the fashion elite, and Wintour was its ultimate gatekeeper. He had achieved a measure of it, with his Yeezy shows becoming a fixture of New York Fashion Week. However, as his behavior grew more erratic and his public statements more dangerous, that relationship soured. While he never attacked Wintour with the same personal vitriol as he did Kim, his entire public persona became an affront to the curated, controlled world she represents. His partnership with Gap collapsed. His Adidas deal hung in the balance. He was no longer just a difficult artist. He was a brand-killing liability. The women who held the keys to the kingdoms he so desperately wanted to be part of, from Kim in the world of media to Wintour in fashion, were now the very obstacles he was determined to bulldoze. By the fall of 2022, the separate fronts of his war, the personal, the professional, the ideological, were converging into a single catastrophic storm. The man who had built an empire on his ability to anticipate and shape culture was now completely alienated from it. The final irreversible break was imminent. The institutions that had protected him, the brands that had funded him, and the fans who had defended him were all preparing to make a choice. The grace period for the tortured genius was over. Kanye West was no longer seen as a brilliant artist who caused problems. He was now a dangerous problem who occasionally made art. The stage was set for a fall of biblical proportions, and the trigger would be his own words, launching him into a final, desperate spiral from which his career would never recover. The war was about to be lost, and the general was too entrenched in his own bunker to hear the world closing in. The silence that followed was not one of reflection, but the eerie calm before a self-inflicted apocalypse. Isolated in his bunker of yes-men and radical ideologies, Kanye West mistook the world's horrified pause for weakness. The final, irreversible break was not a single event, but a rapid-fire sequence of explosions that tore through the remaining pillars of his empire. The trigger, as it so often was, would be his own words. A torrent of hate that would finally make it impossible for the world to look away, to contextualize, or to forgive. The war on women had escalated into a wider conflict, and the collateral damage would be everything he had ever built. It began in Paris. During Paris Fashion Week in October 2022, Ye wore a shirt emblazoned with the phrase, "White Lives Matter," a slogan widely recognized as a racist response to the Black Lives Matter movement. The provocation was deliberate, a direct challenge to the sensibilities of the industry he was trying to dominate. The backlash was swift, but it was merely the opening act. Days later, on the podcast and social media platform of right-wing commentator Candace Owens, he unleashed a rant that would serve as the point of no return. He veered from anti-black sentiment to blatant anti-Semitism, making a series of vile and conspiratorial claims about Jewish people, including that they control the media and finance and have a plan to blackball anyone who opposes them. He threatened to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. The internet recoiled. This was not the rambling of a misunderstood artist. It was the calculated, hateful rhetoric of a man fully embracing the darkest corners of extremism. The response from corporate America was faster and more decisive than anyone could have predicted. The dam of professional tolerance, already strained by his treatment of Kim Kardashian and his erratic behavior, finally shattered. Within days, a domino effect of dissolution began. His multi-million-dollar partnership with the Gap was officially terminated. Balenciaga, which had featured him in its campaigns, cut ties. The most devastating blow came from Adidas. After weeks of internal pressure and public outrage, the sportswear giant, which derived an estimated 8% of its revenue from Yeezy sales, announced it was immediately ending its partnership. The financial impact was staggering. Forbes estimated Yeezy's net worth plummeted from $2 billion to $400 million in a matter of days. He was officially ejected from the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. The Yeezy empire, his most significant commercial and cultural achievement, was wiped out overnight. The talent agency CAA dropped him. His own lawyers resigned. He became a corporate leper, a brand non grata. But this financial collapse was merely the symptom of a deeper, more profound cultural excommunication. The entertainment industry, which had tolerated his tirades for years, now turned its back with finality. The Free Kanye crowd fell silent. Fellow artists, including longtime collaborators and defenders, issued statements condemning his hate speech. He was disinvited from the Grammys, despite having submitted music for consideration. The message was unified and clear. There was no room for this. The myth of the mad genius had been incinerated in the fire of his own bigotry. His war on the women in his life had revealed a pattern of aggression and control. His anti-Semitism revealed the rotten core of a conspiracy-driven worldview that saw enemies everywhere. In the aftermath, a desperate and unhinged pattern emerged, proving that the man had learned nothing. Instead of contrition, he doubled down, appearing on right-wing media with figures like Alex Jones. In one infamous interview, he praised Adolf Hitler, sending any remaining defenders running for the hills. He began a bizarre and short-lived presidential campaign for 2024, holding rallies that were little more than stages for his incoherent grievances. His public appearances became spectacles of a man in freefall, his eyes vacant, his rhetoric increasingly detached from reality. He was no longer a musician or a designer. He was a cautionary tale. The most tragic casualty of this war, however, was not his bank account or his reputation, but his relationship with his children. His public harassment of Kim Kardashian had a direct and painful consequence: limited access to his 4 children. Sources close to the family revealed that Kim, fearing his instability and the toxic environment he cultivated, had set strict boundaries to protect them. The man who once rapped about dropping his daughter off at college couldn't even guarantee a stable, private visit. His war on his children's mother had cost him the very family he claimed to be fighting for. The ultimate price of his aggression was being viewed as an unsafe presence in his own children's lives. The story of Kanye West's downfall is not a simple narrative of cancellation. It is the story of a system that enabled a man's worst instincts until those instincts became a direct threat to the system itself. For years, the world made excuses for his misogyny, his bullying, and his volatility because the art was brilliant and the profits were high. His war on women, from Taylor Swift to Kim Kardashian to the female executives and editors who held power, was often dismissed as drama or part of his creative process. But it was the canary in the coal mine. It revealed a fundamental disrespect for the autonomy and humanity of women, a trait that is inextricably linked to the other forms of bigotry he later embraced. The same impulse that led him to try to control Kim's life led him to blame a shadowy, Jewish cabal for his problems. It was always about power, control, and a refusal to be held accountable. Today, the landscape is a ruin of what once was. The Yeezy brand is a ghost. His music is tainted. His influence has curdled into infamy. The career of Kanye West was not ended by a rival, a journalist, or an industry executive. It was ended by Kanye West. In waging a war on women and then on basic human decency, he systematically destroyed every bridge, burned every sanctuary, and betrayed every fan who ever believed in the beauty of his art. He is a living monument to the fact that no amount of talent can redeem a heart consumed by hatred. The genius is still there, perhaps, but it is now trapped in a prison of its own making, screaming into a void that has finally, and rightly, stopped listening. Direct CTA. This wasn't just a fall from grace. It was a self-destruction played out on the world stage. But what do you think? Was Kanye West's downfall inevitable, or could it have been stopped? Could the industry have intervened sooner, or did they enable his behavior until it was too late? We want to hear your take. Drop your most honest thoughts in the comments below. This is a conversation we need to have. If this deep dive into one of music's most shocking collapses resonated with you, then you cannot miss our next investigation. We're uncovering the truth behind another celebrity who vanished at the peak of their fame. The story is even more shocking than you can imagine. Click here to watch it right now, and if you're not already part of our community, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We're dedicated to bringing you the untold stories and hard truths about the biggest names in entertainment. Don't miss what we uncover next.